One of the smartest men who's ever lived said that all that I know is that I do not know. And while that may be a little bit confusing, today's episode, we're going to talk about what do you know?
Yeah.
So, this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Yeah. Can you name that smartest person who said that?
Socrates.
Yeah.
He said that the only thing that I know is that I know nothing.
Good old
Yeah.
Socrates. I watched Bill and Ted's
Yeah,
Excellent
so
Adventure
great.
again
It's such a good
recently.
movie. I love that movie.
69, dude.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K. Yeah, that's such
Right?
a good movie. It's so ridiculous too, like portray the historical figures and stuff. Oh my God.
Dude, and
It's
and
awesome.
how successful of a career Keanu Reeves has had after that movie.
Oh, dude, it's been amazing. Yeah,
Mind
great
blowing.
movie. And they made another Bill and Ted too. It was even good. It was amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
really
The
good.
Bogus Adventure. I gotta watch that one again.
That's a good one too. I
Yeah.
watched them
So
both recently.
yeah,
Anyway.
so what can you know?
Well, so okay, this is the interesting thing, right? Because like I thought of this because I've been thinking a lot about this, and I keep seeing things where like people's I so I don't believe in any objective truth. I'll say this right now. Like I don't think there's objective truth. I think everything is just contextually based and dependent on a lot of factors, but there's no like truth in a capital T sense, like we used to say in philosophy, right?
Hmm.
But a lot of people seem to operate under the idea that there are objective truths, like that certain things are known, that certain things like say like values, there's good and evil, or that, this thing leads to the truth, this thing doesn't, right? Like that kind of idea. And I noticed it more and more. And I also noticed that like I was reading this scientist wrote this book that I was reading. I can't remember his name, but I started reading it. I just realized like I was like, oh my God, this guy literally believes that there is truth. Like it blew my mind. And so it just dawned on me. I was like, does everybody think this way? That there's like really things we can know, like
Well, I'm
like
pretty
actually
sure a
know
bunch
about the
of
world?
fundamentalist religious people do.
Yes. Well, yeah, obviously, yes, they do, right? They believe that the world's a certain way, that the Bible's literal, whatever, and or whatever book they favor.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. But this question of like, what can we know and in what context can we know it, right? Because like we're human beings. We can only perceive the world as a human being perceives the world. We're both missing a lot of data and adding a lot of interpretation.
Hmm.
And so, I don't know. It's
And
interesting
it
to
and
me.
it all depends on your sensory organs. Like
Yeah.
literally the largest possible scope for what you could know is what your sensory organs perceive.
Yeah. Which is crazy, right? Because like think
Mhm.
about it. Like even visual perception, we see things as certain colors, right? But they aren't actually those colors. That's how light's refracting off it, and we know that. So it's really interesting when you think about like your own experience, not to mention your experience is interpreted. It's not given to you. It's not like passive. It's not like it just comes in and you're like, oh, there's the world, right? You're making all kinds of judgments, value judgments, your mood, your attitude affects how you see things. All these things change the actual experience itself. And
Mhm.
you're only getting that narrow perspective, right, of your little world, not the whole thing.
Mhm.
And yeah. So go ahead.
I really like that. It kind of resonates with this book that I've read called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. And she's all about questioning your thoughts because
Yeah,
basically anytime things basically anytime you're stressed, things aren't working out well, it's
yeah,
just because you haven't questioned your thoughts. And generally, the first question is this true? And the second question
yeah,
is, can I absolutely know it's 100% true?
yeah.
And
And it's no.
yeah, yeah, you can't. But we oftentimes assume that it is true. I do this all the time where I know for a fact that other people are walking too slow and they're in my way and they shouldn't be on their
Yeah.
phone and all this stuff. I know that's true 100% of the time. But yeah, it's not.
Well, we make these, yeah, it's common to make those assumptions, right? But the problem is like it's one thing to make an assumption in the moment you're doing stuff, whatever. It's another thing to think that way all the time, believe it. And I think one of the problems is when we don't think about our own thoughts and think about how we're asserting or assigning truth, we get in the habit or we run the risk of getting very dogmatic. And you see this now all the time. We're like, like look at the US political system, for instance, right? Like acting as if both sides like they have the truth, right? They know what's going on. And it's like absurd and ridiculous. And I think it's funny because like the philosophers I tend to favor, like, I think a lot of them, well, obviously think about the world this way, but it also makes you a lot more open-minded. And it makes you, I think, more careful and less likely to both judge people, right? Because, you don't know. Their perspective might be different. They might have a different idea of it, and you can understand where it's coming from. And it makes you more careful, I think, in your own views and values, not getting caught in that trap of believing that there is a truth and that somehow you have a unique grasp of it that nobody else seems to, right?
Hmm. Yeah, well, there's something for to be said for kind of getting exposed to the world, to different ideas, to a bunch of stuff like that. Like I think we're both lucky in that we've traveled a bit, we've
Yeah.
experienced some stuff. And so you start to see like that if you're just stuck in one place, you can form some pretty harsh judgments based on ignorance mostly.
Yeah. I remember traveling for the first time. One of the first thoughts I had, because like, yeah, you go to different places, cultures are very different, people are very different. But one of the first things I recognized was like, oh, they're just like us. They're all trying to do the best they can with what they have. Like basically at the bottom, that's what they're doing. So yeah, it looks different. It might be different because we're in a different place, but really they're not that different. Like,
Dude, I remember growing up and like I would travel down to like Mexico or something like that. And people would be like, "Isn't it dangerous down there?" And I'm like, "We literally live a stone's throw from Camden where they have freaking executions every freaking night." Like, I don't think there's many more places more dangerous than that.
yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, like, yeah, back when we were in high school, it was like the most dangerous city in the United States. It was ranked that a couple times. It was just horrible, and it's
Hmm.
not even really a city.
Fortunately, Detroit's taken the place of that one, and
Yeah,
pretty much
I
every
know.
other city nowadays. Goodness.
Oh God, it's horrible. Yeah, but that's the funny thing. I think it makes us very it makes us very closed. It makes our world very closed when we start to believe that we have the truth or that we know the truth. And I think it makes us kind of stupid, honestly, because it makes us, we fail to see how things could be different. We fail to see other interpretations and we fail to be open-minded about things. And
Hmm.
like, and I think you're right, though. Challenging our beliefs, though, is one of the most important things. And I'll give you, they did a study. I remember this from a course I took this is back a while ago, but I'm sure it's still probably true. They did a study that their theory was that, with the internet now, right? Anybody with a high school education and the ability to use a computer, they can be a good citizen because they can find out what's going on and they can therefore vote, right? Accordingly. Well, they ran the study and what they found was 97% of people, when they go online, they only look at stuff that affirms their views already. They never look at anything that contradicts them, that presents any sort of other information, alternative viewpoints, anything like that. And I think that's the other crazy thing because, like, I love reading different perspectives on things, even ones that, like, yeah, I might think they're like a little crazy or wonky, but like, I still like reading them because it tells me a lot about the people that hold them. It gives me a different way of looking at the world, and it's interesting, and it pushes me to then think about my own values and views and beliefs and ask, well, are mine any different? Why? Like, and just get to these sort of questions of like, well, why do I even think that? What basis do I have for thinking that?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very easy to get pigeonholed with the internet, and it bothers me that that's what almost all the algorithms do is they just feed you more and more of stuff that you like, and also like more of the polarizing stuff that you
Well,
like,
yeah.
because they know
Which
that's how
also
they get you addicted.
And it makes people more and more on these extremes of thinking they have the sole source of truth. And they're like, well, look at all the evidence. And it's like, that's because that's all you're seeing. Because you're choosing to and because the algorithm's feeding it to you. Like,
Hmm.
you know, oh God, it's funny. And it's like, it's really sad because I think it does make us worse though, because look what's happened the past few years, like you've seen emotions are high. People have been, really separated in beliefs. And then they start thinking that like the other side's totally wrong. And it's like, well, they must not be because they're people too. They must have a reason for thinking this. And they've probably been, misled and pulled along by interested parties, who want their eyeballs and who want their money. And
Hmm.
you don't see everything for what it is.
Yeah, you gotta look where people are incentivized for sure. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because like there's also there's also so there's what we know and there's what we don't know. But there's also what we don't know that we know, and there's also what we don't know that we don't know. So like what we don't know that we don't know are our blind spots. So those things just smack us
Yeah.
upside the head sometimes. But then there's also things that we don't know that we know. Like and these I think are more of like the instinctual type of things because humans have been around for tens, if not hundreds or of
Yeah.
thousands of years or longer. And they're up until 1970, our lives were pretty similar. We spent a lot of time
Yeah.
outside. We did a lot of physical work. We didn't eat that much. And it was pretty similar. And then, like 1970, everything changed. We started living in a world of excess. We live inside the house all the time, stare at a computer, all of that. But, like, even though we don't use these things that we have, I think we still have them and we just don't know.
Yeah, there's like, well, I mean, I think that's where you get that intuition sometimes, about things and stuff. It's coming from some deeper or unconscious place, right? That like you have some knowledge about, you're just not quite aware of it. I would add too, there's also things we can't know, which I think is also important to add in there in
Mm.
that classification, right? Of things that we just,
Like
there's
the
no way
winning
we could
lottery
possibly,
numbers, right?
yeah, yeah, just can't know them. Yeah. I mean, and like, and like big questions, a lot of those we just can't know, right? We have no way of knowing. So you have to also, I think it's also important to admit, like, there's a difference between factual truth and belief, right? And like having beliefs are fine, but admitting to yourself that they're beliefs and they're not truths is important because that keeps you both open-minded, but it also keeps you aware of like your interactions with others and not pushing those beliefs on them as if they're factual truths or anything like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so it's one of those things where what do we actually know?
Not much, honestly. Well, it's funny, like the more you learn about anything, the more questions you end up having, right? And the more you realize we don't know. Like it's funny, like if you read even like, we think science tells us a lot is alive, and it does, but like even like great scientists realize that there's like just so much we have no idea of. And because we don't know, that could change everything else, right? I mean, it could totally change everything.
Hmm.
And I think people forget too that even like science and stuff is an interpretation of things, right? You're using a certain framework or system to interpret data and then come up with hypotheses and solutions to things. It's still within the framework of a human
Dude,
experience and human
I
interpretation.
I can't stand science. Like I think it's the biggest red herring ever because there's only so many things that science can measure. Science really can't measure emotions or anything psychological, you
No,
know? And so that means that's one whole field, like literally, that's one huge aspect of life that science just completely fails. And then all this other stuff about like, I don't know, everybody just thinks if it's science, it's gotta be. But
yeah.
like, no, science is just a method, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. People forget that science asks, it really answers how questions. It gives us detailed and fine descriptions of how a thing works, but it can't tell us anything about the purpose, the why, those larger questions that put a context around it, right? And like I think that's important. Like Plato actually, in one of his in I think it was Euthyphro, Socrates is talking to one of the characters, he's like, well, basically what he says is like, the gods don't fight about what like things you can measure, right? Like we wouldn't fight about like the size of a table or like the size of a door or something. We would just measure it and you solve that problem, right? There's no reason to fight about it. It's something that's verifiable. But things like our values, our beliefs, those are the things we really fight about because there's no way to confirm and measure and once and for all settle it. And so, yeah, I think, you look at science all the time, they make all these claims, but they don't know the why. They don't answer the purpose of it. And so they just move forward, and then all kinds of things can happen from their decisions that were, either unknowns or problematic or who knows what. So
Mhm.
it's crazy.
Is there anything else you want to say about what do we know?
I think we do ourselves a disservice when we think we know, so
Mm,
just keep challenging yourself and those beliefs to kind of push it further to kind of see what you actually do, what you think you know and why. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Question your thoughts and your beliefs.
always.
So there you have it. What do we know? And the answer is nothing, but we don't even know if that's the real answer because we know nothing. So
Nothing.
this is the Existential Stoic podcast. If you enjoyed it, like it or subscribe or just listen more often, tell your friends. Who knows? We will catch you guys
Yeah.
later. Until the next time, I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, man.